Hi guys, my name is Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Today we're going to paint this nice little dove right here because the holidays are upon us, and I thought that it might be a nice little scene to use for your holiday cards if you're industrious enough to do those, unlike me. But anyways, let's do this! And here are this week's materials. You know what to do. So for this one, I actually combined two images together. I took this one as the main one, and then I took a wing from another image because I didn't like the back wing, and kind of spliced it on here. So, I mean, you'll kind of have to do some thinking, but I thought it looked better that way. A little more picturesque. I'm going to start out by masking off the entire bird because it's all white. So in order to protect my brush, I'm dipping it first into a mixture of water and dish soap and then into the masking fluid. That will protect it a little bit, but go ahead and wash your brush as soon as you're done as well. First, we're going to mix up a bunch of blues. So we're going to start out with French Ultramarine, and then Indigo, and then Prussian, and then Phthalo Green. Starting out with a background here, and I'm going to wet the entire thing with a Hake brush and let that soak in for a few seconds. And then I'm going to begin to drop in all these different blues. And it really doesn't matter where you do it and how you do it. Most of this is going to be French Ultramarine, and then the secondary color is the Indigo. But then I'm also going to drop in some Prussian Blue and some of the Phthalo Green in different areas just to give some variety and make some difference here. Doves are often thought of as the symbol of peace, and it's thought that the origins of this symbol go all the way back to the Bible. So in the Bible, when the flood that flooded the entire earth happened, Noah was aboard the ark and he sent out a dove to find out if the flood waters had receded enough for them to come out of the ark. And it did come back with an olive branch, which meant that there were some things growing again and that the waters had receded enough for them to leave the ark. The dove also became the symbol of the Holy Spirit because as Jesus was baptized, the Holy Spirit descended upon him in the bodily form of a dove. And after that, early Christians began to use the dove with the olive branch in its mouth as the symbol of peace. Once I get all of the color laid in the way that I want to, I'm going to take a little piece of shop towel. I'm going to run it along the edge of the tape to get all of that wet paint off the edge so that it doesn't run back in and cause back runs. And I'm going to do the same thing on top of the masking fluid. I've allowed all that to dry, and now that it's mostly dry, I'm actually thinking it needs some more texture. So I'm going to splatter some masking fluid all over the thing to where it kind of looks like either snow or stars, and then we're going to let that dry and then paint over the top of it. Now that all of that masking fluid in the background is dried, which you can't really see it very well because it's blue and it blends in, I'm coming back in with some of my darker colors and I'm kind of dry brushing in some texture all around it. That's just going to make the whole thing mostly a little bit darker, and then we're going to be able to see the texture from the masking fluid that I just added once I take it off. Now that I have all of that color laid in where I want to, I'm going to allow it to dry for at least 30 minutes, probably a little more than that. And now I'm using a rubber cement eraser to take off all of that masking fluid. And as I'm removing it from the background, you can see that what's underneath it isn't white, it's the blue that I originally painted in, but it's lighter than the stuff that's around it. So it's just adding an extra layer of texture. And here's a nice close-up to show you kind of what that texture looks like. You can't see the dry brushing all that much, but in person you can see it. Since this is a holiday card, I'm going to add some cool lettering to the bottom, but since I'm not a calligrapher, and I'm much more likely to screw up the lettering than I am to screw up the bird, I'm going to actually do the lettering next, so that if I screw it up, I can start over without having done the bird as well. I also have made a nice little cheater here for me. I've printed out the word that I want to use in the exact size that I want to use it in, and I have scribbled along the back with a graphite pencil. And I'm just going to lay that on top of here, and I'm going to tape it down on top of the tape part just to make sure that I don't take any of the paint up. And then I'm going to trace over the top of it, and that will leave an impression that I'll be able to see, and that will help guide me to put my letters in the right spot. So now that I have it taped in the exact spot that I want it, I'm taking a mechanical pencil. You could use any pencil you want, or a pen, or whatever. And I'm actually just going down the middle of all of those letters, because you don't really need all the edges and that kind of stuff. Just going down the middle, and that'll leave an impression. Now, you can't see it very well, so I'm coming back in with a graphite pencil to make it shiny so that I can see it a little better on that really dark background. Okay, now when it comes to calligraphy, I am not at all a calligrapher. I had a little bit of training a super long time ago. I've forgotten it all, and it was really difficult. I kept practicing and practicing. It all kept turning out really horrible. So I was getting frustrated. I tried the ink because I've got all of that stuff, you know, with the tips, the calligraphy tips, and I really think that's definitely more for someone who's experienced with calligraphy, with the ink. And then this is acrylic ink, and then I had watercolor ink, and I tried to use some of those with both the pen and the brush, and just a regular little chisel brush. It just was coming out horrible. The Posca pen came pretty close. It's got a brush tip, but it's got like bristles, so it's a little bit more difficult to use for someone who's not used to doing calligraphy, but it came close. And then when I found this did it for me. This was easy enough for someone like me to handle, so it might be good for beginners. This is the Deco brush from Karin. And it has more of a marker tip to it. It's shaped just like the Posca pen, but it's not got bristles. It's more of like a marker tip, and it's got a very fine tip, so it does the little fine details, but it also does the really wide strokes. So that is what I would recommend if you are not a regular calligrapher. It is pretty easy for a beginner. I still would practice a lot before you do it on your actual piece. So I have the Deco brush, and like I said, I'm not used to doing this, so I'm doing this the way that it is easy for me. It's probably not the correct way, but that's the way I'm going to do it. I'm breaking down each letter into strokes. So I'm doing like the larger strokes and then the smaller strokes, kind of. And really, I'm actually going back over the edges if I don't get it thick enough, and filling in all kinds of little gaps that are here and there. Just do whatever you need to do in order to make it look decent, is what I say. If you don't get it all in one stroke, no big deal, just fill it in. This little marker works really well for that kind of stuff. Now we're going to start on the bird, but I do want to say that I taped a protective layer over the top of those letters just in case any water droplets were to fall on them. It's probably a great idea. But anyways, there's not a lot of color variation on this bird, so I'm using very, very watery indigo blue, and I'm just adding that in there, and then I'm softening the edges with clean water, coming back in with the brush with clean water on it and softening the edges. And then in the wing area, there is a little bit of a kind of a pink tone, so I'm coming back in with a mixture of quinacridone magenta and opera rose, and I'm just going to add that in here right in the underside of the wing. I'm also adding that on the top part of the other wing. I did wait until the first wing dried before I started working on the second wing though, because I didn't want them to cause some blooms. And really all I'm doing here is adding color and then softening the edges, and adding color and softening the edges. All of that is dry, and now I'm coming back in with a little bit more depth and color. I'm still using indigo, just adding a little bit of shading and shadowing on the underside of the wings and the underside of the belly. For the feet and the beak, I'm adding very, very watery Alizarin Crimson, and we'll come back in and add detail in a little bit. I'm going to sharpen up this detail on the faraway wing here a little bit, still adding in indigo, and we're just adding and softening yet again. For the shadow on the feet, I've mixed some French Ultramarine into my Alizarin Crimson, and we're going to come in and add that to the shadow areas and the detail areas. We're not going to spend just a ton of time on the feet. We don't want the feet to be the focus of the painting anyway, so the fact that it's kind of dark and blending into the background is a good thing. Here I'm adding in the eye with some really dark indigo blue, and also adding in the crack in the beak and all that kind of stuff, all of that with indigo. Normally I would use Payne's Gray, but that would be an entire different color to add to this, so why not use indigo? They're very similar. You don't have to do this, but I decided that since I had used masking fluid on the bird to keep it white, the edges were very harsh to me, and so I took a tiny little chisel blender with clean water and I ran it along all of the edges and kind of just softened that a little bit, blurred it a little bit. You don't have to do that, but to me it made it look like it wasn't pasted on the background quite as much. I've added just the tiniest hint of French Ultramarine into my indigo, and now I'm adding in just the darkest parts of the shadow on the underside of the wing and on the belly. So another random fact about doves is that they are excellent navigators. They actually have magnetic tissues in their heads that help them detect the Earth's magnetic field and helps them determine direction. I've allowed all of that to dry really nicely, and now I'm coming back in with a Posca brush pen in white, and I'm just adding the highest, whitest highlights. And I mean, you don't even really have to do this if you don't want to, but I think it adds a little bit of a lighting effect, some atmosphere, if you will. So I'm adding that kind of to the top of the head, and then the pupil in the eye, and then along the beak, just a few areas here and there where I want really bright white highlights. And then I wasn't going to do this, but I decided at the last minute to go ahead and add in the olive branch, which is the extra symbol of peace here. So I'm using that deco brush and adding it in silver, just because I think we need to add some more silver in. And now I'm also adding in some silver highlights here and there. You know how Christmas cards do. They're always putting the metallic silver and gold on stuff. So just adding a few finishing touches here and there with the silver. And then I'm going to add just a tiny little bit of dimension by adding some very watery indigo blue to add some kind of shadowy areas to this olive branch. Just right over the top of the silver. And here's the finished product, all dry and with the tape removed. And I will say that the dimensions that I used for this, it's a little bit bigger, but you can shrink it down to a 5" by 7" size really easily, which is a very common size for greeting cards here in the United States. If you're from other countries, I'm not really sure what your sizes are, but you know, have some fun with it. And there you have it, a nice peaceful little scene that you can share with all your friends for this lovely holiday season. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of that fun stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I will see you again in 2 weeks.